Some transformations don't begin with thought. They begin with a sound, with a breath you didn't realize you were holding, with a vibration that rises from within, not to be heard, but to be felt. This isn't about volume. It's about presence. It's about discovering that your voice is not just something you use to speak, but something that shapes who you are becoming. There is a quiet war happening inside many people, a war between intention and vibration, between what the mind wants and what the body still remembers. You say you want to prosper. You visualize wealth, love, freedom, but somewhere deeper, beneath the words, your breath is shallow, your chest stays tight, and your voice doesn't carry conviction. Not because you don't believe, but because your nervous system hasn't caught up with your desire. And in the universe of manifestation, vibration is what speaks the loudest. Neville Goddard said it simply, feeling is the secret. Not thinking, not hoping, but feeling as if the wish were already fulfilled. That kind of feeling cannot be faked by thought. It's not an idea, it's a state. And that state begins in the body, in the way you breathe, in the way your voice trembles or rises, in the way your entire system responds to the truth you're finally allowing yourself to feel. So many try to force a new reality with mental affirmations while their body is still anchored in fear, guilt, and old identity patterns. But here is what's often forgotten. Your body is not a follower of your thoughts, it's a transmitter, a filter, a living memory. Until you embody the new feeling, until you breathe and speak like the person you say you want to be, your outer world will only echo back your inner hesitations. And this is where the voice becomes sacred. This is where breath stops being automatic and becomes intentional, where you stop thinking of manifestation as something you do, and start experiencing it as someone you become. Neville used inner speech to reshape reality, to saturate the subconscious. But what happens when you allow that speech to move through your breath, your tone, your sound? What happens when you externalize your inner assumption? This is not a performance. It's a return. Because the truth is, your voice already carries the memory of who you are meant to be. Your breath already knows the rhythm of your future self. And when you activate them together, you unlock a frequency that reality cannot ignore. Science is now echoing what mystics have always known. Bruce Lipton, through the lens of epigenetics, showed us that our emotional environment shapes gene expression, that what we feel, and how we express that feeling, becomes biological. When you change the signal, you change the system. When you breathe differently, when you speak from your elevated identity, you rewire the story written in your cells. But none of this works if you only whisper change in your thoughts. You have to feel it in your chest. You have to let it move through your sound. This is not about effort. It's about coherence. It's about alignment between who you say you are and how your body agrees. So today you don't need to struggle. You don't need to find another technique. You only need to listen to the voice that's already within, to the breath that's been waiting to carry you into your next self. Because just like you can't install new software without rebooting the system, you can't install a new self-image without activating the instruments that house it. Breath and voice, they are your reboot. They are the sacred gate between the old you and the one who's already free. Now, feel your breath. Notice its rhythm. Hear the silence that precedes your voice. That silence is not emptiness. It's potential. And your voice is the key that unlocks it. Your breath knows who you think you are. Some identities don't live in your thoughts. They live in your lungs, in the space between one breath and the next. You can repeat all the affirmations you want, but if your breath is still shallow, if your body still breathes like someone afraid of the next moment, then your reality will reflect that silent fear. Not because you're broken, but because the breath is the biography of your nervous system. It remembers what the mind tries to forget. You might say, I am abundant, but if your inhale is tight and your exhale hesitant, the deeper signal being sent is still, I am surviving. You see, breath is not just a response to emotion. It is a rhythm encoded with identity. The way you breathe reveals who you believe you are, and who you believe you are is what you manifest. Neuroscience gives us clarity here. The vagus nerve, a sacred bridge between body and mind, responds to how we breathe. When your breath drops into the belly, when it slows and softens, it sends a message of safety to your entire being. That message opens the door to new identity. But when your breath stays locked in your chest, fast and shallow, it tells your body, stay small, stay guarded, stay in the past. And that is where the contradiction hides. You visualize a new life, but breathe like someone who expects pain. You imagine wealth, but exhale like someone preparing to lose. You dream of freedom, but inhale like you're bracing for impact. Breath reveals what words cannot. It tells the truth of who you're being. This is why manifestation must begin in the body. The imagination is powerful, yes, but breath is what makes it receivable. Breath is the soil that receives the seed of thought. Without it, your visions remain floating ideas, never fully taking root. Trying to manifest while breathing like a hunted animal is like planting golden seeds on dry stone. The potential is there, but the environment doesn't support it. So what happens when you change the breath? You change the signal. You change the frequency your body emits. You shift from the lack self, the one who begs reality for change, to the creator self, who breathes as if it is already done, as if the future has already arrived and is living in your chest. And it doesn't take hours, just 3 minutes a day, 3 minutes of intentional breath, where each inhale declares, I am safe, and each exhale says, I already have. Where breath becomes a prayer, not of desperation, but of alignment, where your body begins to remember what your soul already knows, because your breath knows who you think you are, and the moment you breathe differently is the moment reality starts listening. There's a tone behind every truth you carry, a subtle vibration woven into your words even when you don't notice. It's not about the sentence itself, but about how it sounds when it leaves your mouth. You can say, I am worthy, but if the voice that delivers it trembles with doubt or disconnect, the message that reaches your subconscious is still uncertainty. The universe doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to how your being says it. This is why so many affirmations fall flat. Not because the words are wrong, but because the sound carries no conviction. The voice isn't aligned with the identity being claimed. And the self, always listening, always sensing, doesn't believe what it cannot feel. There's a principle in psychology called the Galatea effect. It tells us that our performance, our results, our energy, all rise or fall according to the belief we hold about ourselves. But what most forget is that this belief is reinforced every time you hear yourself speak. Your voice is a mirror, and each time you speak from a place of power, that mirror reflects a new self-image back to your nervous system. But here's the twist. It's not about shouting. It's not about saying it louder. It's about saying it with resonance, with rhythm, with a tone that vibrates as truth. When you say, I am abundant, do you say it like you've already received it? Do you sound like someone who knows, not hopes? This is not performance. It's presence. When your voice begins to match the frequency of the version of you who already has the life you desire, your reality must begin to reorganize around that sound. Not because you convinced the world, but because you convinced your inner field. And this is where practice becomes power. When you record your affirmations, not as robotic declarations, but as emotional rhythms, your voice becomes medicine. When you speak your new identity aloud with pacing and inflection that reflect emotional truth, you activate a loop of self-confirmation. Your ears hear it. Your body absorbs it. Your field shifts with it. The voice is a tuning fork. If it vibrates lack, life tunes itself to scarcity. If it vibrates embodiment, life cannot help but harmonize to that. You become the singer, and reality becomes the echo. So say it again. Not louder, but truer. Let the tone reveal what you now believe. Let the vibration carry the identity home. Because the sound of who you believe you are is already creating your world. Imagination is a sacred force. It is how the soul speaks in symbols, how the future whispers to the present. But without breath, even the most vivid imagination remains a floating vision, a dream with no ground to land on. Because to feel something real, you must embody it. And embodiment begins where thought ends, in the breath. So many have read Neville Goddard's words, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and misunderstood them as an invitation to think more vividly. But it was never about thinking. It was about anchoring, not visualizing what you want, but becoming the one who already lives it. And that becoming is not cerebral. It's cellular, it's emotional, it's respiratory. Modern science calls it embodied cognition, a truth that mystics always knew. Your body helps your brain believe. You can't mentally override a nervous system stuck in the past. You can't convince yourself of a new future while your breath still speaks the language of anxiety, survival, and lack. You can't think your way into freedom. You have to breathe it. You have to let it settle into your chest like a memory returning home. Mirror neurons in your brain fire not just when you experience something, but when you feel yourself experiencing it. That's why breath changes everything. Because when you imagine a scene with calm, coherent breathing, your brain begins to treat that scene as lived truth, not as possibility, but as present. And this is the hidden key. Imagination is the paint, but breath is the canvas. Without the canvas, the paint falls into emptiness. Without breath, the vision has nowhere to land. But when you breathe with rhythm, with stillness, with emotional intention, the image begins to integrate. The body begins to believe. And what the body believes, the world starts to reflect. You don't need to try harder. You don't need to visualize more. You only need to feel the truth of it. Not with tension, but with openness. Not with force, but with presence. That presence lives in your breath. It is the doorway between the self that wishes and the self that receives. So the next time you close your eyes to imagine, remember, it's not just what you see. It's how you breathe while you see it. Because feeling it real is not a thought exercise, it is a vibrational agreement. And your breath is the signature that makes it official. Before we move on, let this land for a moment. Your voice isn't just sound, it's alignment. And your breath is not just air, it's permission. Now, if this is resonating with you, if something inside you feels seen, remembered, pause with me. There's something waiting for you in the pinned comment. A message, a next step, a spark that meets you exactly where you are. Not more noise, just deeper resonance. Take a breath, feel into it, and when you're ready, we'll keep going. Because the next shift, it's already moving through you. There are voices within you that were never meant to be silenced, but somewhere along the way they were. Not by force, but by shame, by the quiet, invisible contract you signed with the world that said, I will dim myself to belong. And in that silence, a part of your identity froze in time, the part that knew how to express without fear, the part that trusted its sound before it needed permission. Singing is not about talent. It's not about hitting notes or performing for others. It is an act of reclamation, a spiritual rebellion against the inner pattern that says, be quiet. Stay small. Don't feel too much. Every note you sing becomes a vibration that disarms that old voice, because that voice was built on suppression, and sound is its undoing. In the psychology of transformation, the throat is more than a passage for words. It is a gate, a space where emotion and expression converge. It holds every unspoken truth, every swallowed feeling, every moment you were told that your voice was too much or not enough. And over time, that silence becomes a spell, a trance you don't even know you're under. But the spell can be broken, because shame cannot survive expression. When you sing, even softly, even brokenly, you declare to your nervous system, I am safe to feel. I am safe to be seen. You interrupt the old identity not with logic, but with sound, and that sound becomes a key. This is why chanting identity mantras is not just spiritual practice, it is vibrational healing. When you repeat a phrase, not just with words but with melody, you bypass resistance. You create a pathway where feeling flows. You don't just say, I am whole. You become whole in the vibration of your own voice. Each note becomes a choice, a dismantling of the old self, a tuning of the new. You don't need to sound perfect. You only need to sound true. Because in that truth, in that rawness, something ancient awakens. Something real begins to take form. So let your voice tremble. Let it rise. Let it remember. Because every time you sing, you're not just making sound. You're unlocking the door that leads back to who you've always been. Every note you sing breaks a lock on the door of your future self. And soon that door isn't locked at all. It's open, waiting, ready. Your brain doesn't just crave repetition. It craves meaning wrapped in novelty. That spark of surprise, that moment of aliveness. This is where transformation becomes sustainable. And in the landscape of manifestation, where so many rituals fall into dry routine, this insight becomes crucial. If the ritual doesn't move you emotionally, it won't move your reality. Dopamine, often misunderstood as a reward chemical, is actually the messenger of anticipation. It lights up when you feel emotionally engaged, especially when something familiar is infused with something new. That's why sound is so powerful. It brings life back into the sacred. It makes the ritual a living experience, not a chore to be performed, but a moment to be felt. Visualizing your future self in silence has power, yes, but something shifts when you add voice. When you give tone, rhythm, and melody to your affirmation, your brain pays attention differently. Suddenly, it's not just an image, it's an experience, a soundscape your body remembers, a ritual that doesn't just echo in your mind, but resonates in your cells. Sound activates more regions of the brain than language alone. When you sing your affirmations or speak your vision with musical cadence, you're not just engaging the intellect, you're lighting up memory, emotion, movement, imagination all at once. This multisensory activation strengthens the neural pathways tied to your new identity. That's why rituals that involve sound feel more alive, why a sung declaration carries more emotional weight than a whispered one. Because your body listens differently when your voice carries emotion, and the universe listens differently when your voice vibrates with the frequency of already having. Think of it like this. Reading a menu is not the same as tasting the meal. One informs, the other transforms. When your manifestation practice becomes an experience, through sound, through rhythm, through voice, it moves from concept into embodiment. And embodiment is where the shift happens. So if you find yourself bored with your ritual, it's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign your nervous system needs more aliveness. And sound is the doorway. Add tone, add melody. Let the words of your new self dance in your throat. Because when you enjoy the feeling of becoming, you stop chasing outcomes. You start generating them. He had built a business with discipline, strategy, long hours, and relentless focus. But behind the success, there was a quiet fatigue he could no longer ignore. He was always pushing, always chasing. And somehow, despite all the effort, the fulfillment never matched the results. Until something unexpected happened. Not in his schedule, but in his voice. It began subtly. A practice he dismissed at first. Speaking his intentions aloud each morning, not as commands, but as declarations. Singing them, even softly, into the mirror. I no longer chase, I attract. I am the field that draws aligned opportunity. At first he felt awkward. His voice cracked, but something deeper was listening. His body, his nervous system. The part of him that had always been on high alert. Day by day, the resistance softened. His voice grew steadier, not because he was trying harder, but because he was finally believing what he was saying. And in that sound, in that gentle rhythm of spoken truth, something recalibrated. He stopped grinding. He started receiving. Clients arrived without him forcing. Opportunities unfolded without the usual tension. It wasn't luck. It was alignment. He had stopped speaking from pressure. He had started speaking from presence. From the version of himself that already existed on a higher plane and had simply been waiting to be embodied. This wasn't mindset work. It was nervous system alchemy. His favorite ritual became 5 quiet minutes each morning, face to face with his own reflection. Not to convince, but to connect. Not to perform, but to declare. His voice had become a compass, a tuning device, a spiritual instrument that aligned him with the frequency of who he already was. When your voice changes, your timeline shifts. Not because the sound itself holds magic, but because it awakens the memory of the self you've always carried within. And when that memory becomes audible, when it finds rhythm in your voice, the world around you cannot help but respond. Not to the words, but to the one who finally means them. There is a belief, quiet but pervasive, that manifestation must be done in silence, that to be spiritual is to be still, that to be powerful is to be invisible. And while there is truth in silence, there is also a danger, the danger of suppressing your own frequency in the name of peace. Somewhere along the journey, many were taught that real creation happens in the mind alone, that to speak it out loud is to dilute its sacredness, that expression is ego, and silence is soul. But what if this belief has become a prison? What if the silence you've been practicing is not sacred stillness, but spiritualized suppression? Your voice is not noise. It is vibration. It is energy in motion. It is the raw, living sound of your becoming. And when you refuse to express it, not from peace but from fear, You cut yourself off from one of the most powerful tools of embodiment, because suppressed voice is suppressed energy, and suppressed energy cannot create. Every sacred tradition knew this. From the chants of the desert mystics to the mantras of Himalayan sages, sound was never seen as disruption. It was seen as sacred order, as alignment through vibration. They didn't just imagine divinity, they intoned it. They let it move through their breath, their tone, their song. There is no requirement that manifestation be quiet. That belief is not from your soul. It's from the part of you that still fears being seen, still fears being too much, still believes that power must be hidden to be real. But truth needs a voice, and so does your future self. This is not about shouting into the void. It's about choosing a phrase, a sound, a chant that feels like home. That feels like your truth clothed in tone. It's about making your vibration audible, about taking your inner reality and giving it a pulse that can be heard, even if only by you. Silence has its place. It teaches you to listen, but expression turns what you hear into life. Sound is not a break from the sacred, it is the sacred in motion. When you speak your truth with breath and rhythm, you don't disturb the divine. You join it. So let go of the fear that manifestation must be done in shadows. Let your voice rise, not as noise, but as permission, as resonance, as the living proof that you no longer ask for your future. You become it, one sound at a time. Because silence is sometimes golden, but expression is gold in motion. Something extraordinary happens when you sing, not just out of habit but with intention. Your brain doesn't just hear the sound, it participates. It lights up in ways that simple thought cannot replicate. Regions that govern memory, emotion, imagination, and movement all come alive, converging into one coherent experience. You're not just thinking a new self into being, you're rehearsing it on every level. This is the gift of singing. It bridges what you want to become with how your nervous system learns, because your brain doesn't change through information alone. It changes through repetition, emotion, and multisensory input. And when you sing your new identity, when you let melody shape the words of who you are becoming, you're giving your brain all three. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire itself, thrives on these moments. It thrives on novelty laced with meaning, on sound that doesn't just entertain but transforms. Singing in different tones, especially when infused with emotional truth, strengthens these new pathways. It's not about performance. It's about permission to feel differently, to sound differently, to live differently. You don't need to sing like anyone else. You don't even need to sound good. You only need to sound true. When you allow your new self-concept to move through melody, simple, honest, intentional, you're anchoring it deeper, not just as a hope, but as a reality already felt. This is what I call neurovocal rehearsal, a practice of becoming through sound, a way to sing your future not as fantasy, but as fact, a melody that doesn't beg for change but declares, "This is who I am now." And as you repeat it, your brain listens, your cells respond, your field realigns, because you're not just changing your thoughts, you're remodeling your vibrational architecture. You're teaching your system to expect, embody, and recognize a new baseline of reality, not by force, but through frequency, through the harmonized sound of belief made audible. So if the mind doubts, let the voice speak. If the body hesitates, let the song lead. Because when you sing your future with presence, the future begins to recognize you, not as someone trying to reach it, but as someone who's already there. There are words you never said that still echo inside you, sentences you swallowed, feelings you buried, and they live on, not as thoughts but as tension in the body, as silence in the throat, as frozen moments in the nervous system. You move forward in life, but a part of you is still there, back in that unspoken pain, still waiting for release. Forgiveness is not always about others. Sometimes it's about letting your own voice be heard, finally, after years of silence. Because the energy of what wasn't said doesn't disappear. It becomes background noise in your field, shaping your reactions, your self-perception, your ability to receive. You might be doing the inner work, saying the right affirmations, visualizing the life you want. But if your system is still holding on to unexpressed grief, anger, shame, or regret, it will distort the signal you send, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the frequency of the past is still playing beneath your present intentions. And that's where your voice becomes medicine. Not to blame, not to relive, but to release, to make audible what has been trapped, to unfreeze the parts of you that never had the chance to speak their truth. When you allow your voice to carry those old stories out of your body, not as a rant but as a ritual, you shift from suppression to integration. There's a quiet power in vocal forgiveness, in speaking the words you needed to hear, in saying what your younger self couldn't. I forgive you. I let this go. I no longer carry what was never mine. Not for drama, not for performance, but for the simple grace of allowing your body to stop guarding the pain. Because until you give voice to the unsaid, it lingers, like a ghost. But once spoken, even softly, even through tears, it begins to move. It finds completion. It no longer haunts. You don't need to fix the past. You only need to free the energy still trapped in its silence. So let your voice become the channel, not just for affirmation, but for release. Because healing isn't only light, it's sound. And every word you finally say becomes a frequency of liberation, not just for who you are now, but for every version of you that waited to be heard. There is a moment, after the meditation ends, after the affirmation fades, when the old self returns like a tide. You felt it, clarity, confidence, even expansion. And then slowly, without warning, the habitual identity creeps back in. The version of you that doubts, that contracts, that forgets the feeling of wholeness. And you wonder, why can't I stay in that state? The answer isn't lack of effort, it's lack of rhythm. Identity is not a one-time declaration. It's not a flash of inspiration. It is a pattern, repeated, reinforced, remembered. And like any rhythm, it must be practiced, not once, but daily. Not with force, but with reverence. Most people lose their new self because they treat transformation as an event. But true identity work is ritual. It's what you do when no one is watching. It's how you speak to yourself when the emotion fades. It's the rhythm you entrain your body to live by. And this is where singing becomes sacred. When you tie your affirmations, your intentions, your new beliefs to sound, especially sound repeated with breath, you create anchors. You link your new identity to vibrations your nervous system can recall. This is more than memory. It is conditioning. Not the kind that controls, but the kind that reorients. Each time you return to your voice, each time you chant or sing or repeat a phrase with feeling, you are conditioning your body to expect that version of reality. It becomes familiar. It becomes safe. And what becomes safe becomes sustainable. This is how vocal anchoring works. Your breath sets the tempo. Your voice carries the message. And your nervous system, over time, accepts the rhythm as truth. You're not just affirming. You're in training. You're building muscle memory for your future self. Repetition is not redundancy. It is re-entry. Each cycle of sound is a doorway, a chance to walk back into the self you're choosing, not as escape, but as embodiment. And the more you sing it, the more it stays, until the new identity is no longer something you visit. It's where you live. It's who you are. And it sings through you even when you're silent. Sound it until you become it. You don't become what you want. You become what you feel is real. And feeling isn't just a mood. It's a frequency, carried by breath, sustained by sound. Neville Goddard's deepest truth was never about thinking your way into a new life. It was about sounding like the one who already lives it. Your voice and your breath are not tools to get more. They're instruments that reveal more of who you already are. When used with intention, they become bridges between past and future, between survival and creation, between who you've been and who you're finally ready to embody. Science confirms what mystics have always known. As Bruce Lipton reminds us, your biology responds to emotional signals. Your breath and your voice are those signals. Speak with coherence and your nervous system starts believing. Breathe with presence and your cells begin to respond. You are not just shifting your mindset, you're shifting your field. This is why singing your truth, breathing your identity, and repeating your sound matters. Not because repetition forces change, but because it familiarizes your system with a new vibration. And what feels familiar becomes sustainable. Your voice is a spiritual compass. Every phrase you sing, every breath you shape with intention, reinforces the self you're choosing. And over time, That self-stabilizes, not as a hope, but as a home, the one you live in, the one you rise from. So don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait for proof. Let the sound come through you now, because breath is the wind of your soul, and your voice is the sail. Together, they don't push you toward your future. They carry you into it. Sound it, until you become it. And you will. You already are. And when you're ready for what comes next, check the pinned comment. If something inside you has been quietly nodding, you'll know why.